Hey Bible lovers, I'm Tim Nichols, and I'm here to bring you a little bit of a different type of Nicholsworth. I was asked the question of should we venture into Bibles that were translated by people from other faith traditions? For example, Catholics, Orthodox, and sometimes even moving into cults. Now, I never recommend reading Bibles that were translated by cults. For example, the New World Translation that was translated by the Jehovah's Witnesses, I just recommend that you completely avoid that one. The Sefer Bible is another example, but there are some Bibles from other faith traditions that many would consider orthodox, but they include some translations that may be a little more loose, they may be a little more ecumenical, they may also include the Apocrypha. I'm actually going to put a video on the end screen on whether or not Christians should read the Apocrypha. I definitely think you should establish yourself in the 66 books first. But once you do, I believe reading the Apocrypha can actually be beneficial. I also believe reading translations from a more ecumenical perspective can also be beneficial, and even reading translations that are considered Catholic can be beneficial. But the most important thing is you need to establish yourself first. Go ahead and check out my thoughts here. Catholic translations, I don't have much of a problem with because generally speaking, Catholic translations are just translations of the original text. Yeah, you're going to have a couple biases here and there, but you could argue that the ESV has a couple biases toward Calvinism. You could argue that the NRSV UE has some ecumenical biases. You're going to have bias in translations because they're done by man. Here's my recommendation when it comes to translations. Number one, I think that everyone should read a translation that is literal as possible, word for word. For me, I land with the New King James. And one that's a little more dynamic, a little more toward the thought for thought side. And that one for me is the CSB. So the NKJV is my primary, the CSB is my balance, and then when I want to go further into the translation spectrum, I go ahead and move into the NLT, which is all the way to this end, almost a paraphrase, but still a translation. So that's number one. Number one, read one from each translation philosophy. Number two is read a translation from every translational source. For example, I have read the New King James from the Textus Receptus. I've read the King James from the Textus Receptus. I have read countless Bibles from the Nestle and Aland, or the Critical Apparatus as they call it, the NIV, the NASB, the ESV, the BSB, several of those, endless. And then the majority text, I think, is important, and the NJV, the WEB, the EOB, and then the Latin Vulgate, which your only real option is going to be the Douay-Rheims or the Knox Bible. The Confraternity Bible, I believe that one is partially based on the Latin. That was never really complete. That's another sort of option for you. So, translation spectrum. Get a good balance of the Word of God from translation spectrum. Read a word for word, read a more dynamic thought for thought, and then I like that middle ground with the CSB as well. And then read one from each translation source. And then I think you can venture into other translations, some that are more ecumenical, like the NRSV. You can venture into the Nabre, which is probably going to be my least favorite Catholic Bible from what I've read of it. You can get the RSV2CE. It's more of a Protestant or ecumenical translation, but the Catholics have their edition of it. Even the ESV-CE, it's been anglicized, and the Catholics have made some changes here and there that was actually approved by the Catholic Church in India, which is really interesting. That's kind of my thoughts on venturing into Catholic study material, but yeah, even reading Catholic Bibles, I don't have an issue with that. The NAB, I actually have a copy of the New American Bible at home that was my grandfather's. So let me know, what do you think? Do you think that Christians should read translations outside their own faith traditions? God bless you. Keep calm. Jesus on. This is your Nicholsworth.